Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new series called Cut Content Files, where I go through and explain cut and unfinished content from my favorite games. Today I'll be discussing the E3 2002 beta build of Half-Life 2. I'm sure that most Half-Life fans, and even most people on the internet by this point, know about the Half-Life 2 beta leak, so I'm not going to explain it in detail, but here are links in the top right to some helpful videos if you have no idea where to start in all this. Anyways, I'll give a quick explanation for the uninitiated. In 2003, a German hacker named Axel Gimbe hacked into Valve's systems and downloaded the then unreleased Half-Life 2 source code, subsequently releasing a playable version online. This caused Valve to completely overhaul the game, and this is from where the HL2 we know today was born. Several playable builds were leaked before the game's release, and today we'll be looking at the E3 2002 build. As the original leak was highly unstable, dedicated fans have compiled together playable fixed versions of these builds and provided updated maps, textures, and models to overall increase playability. If you want to download the Half-Life 2 beta mega build for yourself, the download link will be in the description. Just a forewarning, some of these maps are edited from their original versions with either retail assets or fan-made, so this isn't exactly 100% what the game was like during its development stages. Okay, so first I tried clicking New Game, and it brought me to the E3_Town series of maps. This area would eventually become the Ravenholm section, but with the lake part completely scrapped. This beta version bears a striking resemblance to the retail Ravenholm, reason being that a lot of the textures and map layout remain unchanged in the final game. The ending bit of this map has you riding a cart to the other side of the town, showing off some of the physics engine in the process. I unfortunately missed the cart and it left without me, but that isn't something NoClip can't fix. The section ends when the player gets out of the cart, swarmed by zombies, and the game fades to black. What's interesting here is that the fade to black doesn't actually trigger a level load, you can just stand here till the zombies kill you. Next we have the map E3 Depot. It takes place in the Wasteland, a section that was cut because of the scrapping of the Combine ocean draining plotline, which I personally think would have been really cool to see in the final game. The map begins with some antlions fighting a Combine soldier, with an antlion guard nearby. The antlion guard seems to have little to no AI, not moving or attacking the player. It only moves when a trigger is hit for it to run up and push the Combine APC. I assume it was meant to push it off the cliff, but the animation was never finished or is just broken. Proceeding through the wasteland, you can see many remnants of the old Half-Life 2 story, such as the track for the Razor train and the actual depot itself. After climbing some rocks, the player reaches a lighthouse with some supplies and a rocket launcher. I think there was originally supposed to be a gunship battle here, as there's an RPG ammo crate at the top of the lighthouse, but for whatever reason it's completely broken. The idle gunship is immortal, and it took me way too long to figure this out. Next, we have the map E3_Industrial. This map is essentially a better polished version of the original City 17 map from the 2001 build of the game. Although there's a distinct difference in atmosphere, you can sort of see the resemblance in map layout to the final game City 17 levels. Notable things about this version of City 17 is the inclusion of child labor. As you can see, the player was meant to witness the Combine's cruel oppressive nature in full swing, with these child laborers burning cremator heads, and the workers in the stenographer's chasm. One thing I've always loved about the Half-Life 2 beta is how different the atmosphere was meant to be from the retail product we got. Sure, the retail Combine were oppressive, but the beta Combine were another level. They even go so far as to control the weather and amount of oxygen in the air, as seen in the Cut Air Exchange chapter, which sadly does not make an appearance in this build of the game. Now we're on to the Borealis map, E3_Ship. This entire Borealis section was cut from the final game, and was supposed to take place in between the Canal chapters and the Black Mesa East. The whole thing consists of small combat areas with the player fighting an early version of the Stalker enemy, combine soldiers, and some zombies. There's not much interesting to talk about, it's mostly just ship interior and lots of pipes. One problem I found with this level is how little ammo and health pickups there are scattered around. I know these maps were made for E3, but some of the parts were pretty frustrating with how little ammo you're given and how much damage these enemies do. But it's an unfinished beta, so I can't really complain. The next map is E3_Striders. This is a particularly interesting map because it would become part of the later City 17 chapters of the retail game. It also features a very interesting cut enemy, which I'll explain later on. The player starts in a sort of museum building and then moves onto the streets, passing a few striders on the way. After passing through a few abandoned crumbling buildings, a strider blocks the player's path and forces them into a nearby alley, where a grate comes open revealing Alex below calling the player. After jumping down and talking to Alex for a second, a combine soldier climbs down the ladder and is immediately impaled by the Hydra, one of the most interesting cut enemies from Half-Life 2. The Hydra then stares back at Alex and the player, and the screen fades to black. The last map in the E3 series of maps is E3_Terminal. This is pretty much just the beginning chapter of Half-Life 2, with minor differences in level design, props, and details. There's not much to say about this one, as for the most part it resembles the final game's visual aesthetic, just with the beta version of the Citadel in the distance. One interesting thing to note about this map is the fact that a screenshot of it is included on the retail game's box art. Here's what it looks like on my own physical copy of the game. So, as I was getting ready to record these lines, I went back to the beta to get more footage of this level, and no-clipped around a bit through inaccessible areas of the map until I found this area, which I thought looked cool to explore. So I no-clipped around a bit more, and I found this alleyway area, which apparently had a trigger in it to start this scripted marching sequence, which frankly looks really cool and shows off a cut enemy, the Combine Guard. This is when things started to get strange. Rebels begin to attack the marching soldiers, and when you turn around and go down the alley, Combine soldiers and a Combine Guard bust through the gate, blocking your path, forcing you through this door. Now what's interesting is the sequence is supposed to continue with the Combine Guard breaking through the door, but in my fear I continued through the corridor with the open door and encountered this strange creature, which I have never seen before in any of Half-Life 2 betas and have no idea what it is. I vaguely remember seeing something resembling it in the book Half-Life 2 Raising the Bar, but I can't be certain. What's interesting as well is that upon seeing it, the creature played the sound squeal.wav. This sound can only be heard in a few places, such as this clock structure in a later version of this map, and in the Highway 17 section of the final game. If you want to know more about the strange clock and squeak.wav, then in the description is a link to a great video by the YouTuber Radiation Hazard. After this, I took the liberty of exploring some of the other development maps which are not at all in any finished state, but were still interesting nevertheless. Among these are an early version of the canal levels, which bear striking resemblance to the level structure of the retail release, some of the underground levels which showed up in the final game, and some developer test levels, which I'll touch on in a minute. I ended up skipping some of the early levels though, such as the coast section and what would become Nova Prospect. I might revisit them in a later video if you guys want me to. There's also a level that would eventually become Eli's Lab, fully made up of placeholder textures, which is mostly broken, so I didn't explore much of it. I did get this very terrifying glitch when I killed Mossman though.
Our paths have never actually crossed before, but I feel as if I know you. I've been here.
One interesting thing to note about the early canal levels is how similar they are to the ones in the final build of the game. Bits and pieces of level design were switched around in retail, but the main design remains the same, except for some textures being placeholder textures. Some areas were scrapped entirely in retail and replaced, with this one being scrapped to become this area with the manhacks and explosive barrels. Overall, it was very fun to play through these canal levels and see how the early chapters of Half-Life 2 could have been. It's really cool to see little things like these developer nodes, placeholder textures, and completely different map geometry mashed up with familiar retail level geometry. Finally, we have the developer maps I referred to earlier. Perf Test is a developer map used to test various features of the source engine, such as displacements and various lighting and particle effects. A recurring theme in these maps seems to be the usage of Half-Life 1 assets as developer tests, which makes me think parts of these maps could also be left over from Half-Life Source's development. Perf Test B is pretty much the same thing, with different rooms to test textures, particles, rendering effects, and interestingly enough, 3D skyboxes. This 3D skybox section lends to my theory that these maps are left over from Half-Life Source's development, as although these brushes are untextured, they resemble the cliff structures from the surface tension chapter of Half-Life 1. Plus, this spinning robot room is amazing. The map testroom_commander is pretty much just a map made for testing the NPC commanding feature, which was revamped completely in the final game. The map testroom_standards is a map used to show standard sizing for things like doors, doorknobs, barrels, crates, stairs, ladders, etc., and has these creepy lifeless Alexes just standing there. I personally think this is a really interesting map, although none of the buttons work, which gives credit to my theory that they're only there for sizing purposes. Training Room is just a Hazard Course style map that teaches the player how to use the NPC commanding feature. Nothing much to it. I'm not actually sure if this one was made during Half-Life 2's development or just made by the people who compiled the beta mega build, but who knows. The map Zoo_Extras is just, frankly, terrifying. I'm just gonna skip to the next one. Zoo_Portal is, I really have no idea. It looks like it could have been used to test lighting, but the entire thing looks like a bad acid trip. Zoo_Shader is a map meant to test all the different types of shaders that can be used in the source engine and what they look like when applied to models. My favorite part of this map is a large pipe with "shoot me" text on it that simulates liquid dripping out of the bullet holes. This is an insanely cool effect, which I personally wish was in the retail release. And that's pretty much it. There's just a few maps that I didn't go through in this video. If you'd like, I'll go through them in another video. Just leave a comment. I adore the Half-Life 2 beta aesthetic, and I will always be extremely captivated by the development of Half-Life 2, one of my favorite games of all time. If you enjoyed this video and want me to make more like this, then make sure to subscribe and share this video. I absolutely love the Half-Life 2 beta leak and the development process of both games, so expect many more videos about the Half-Life series and its development. If you like the stuff I make and want me to make more, consider supporting me on Patreon. It's optional, but helps me make better videos. If you want me to cover any specific games with cut content in this series, then make sure to comment them below. I hope you guys all have a good day or night. See ya.